Hello Steelers, and welcome to this book review of Burning Steel by Peter Hart. This has literally just been released in the last couple of months. This is printed by Profile Books. It's currently retailing, let me just check, I can't remember how much it's retailing for. £25 it says on the inside of this. I'm not sure where, if you can be able to get that a bit cheaper somewhere else, like through Amazon perhaps, but I know that if you go through the publisher, the author will get the money. Peter sent this through to me, or at least had the publishing house send it through to me as a review copy, so I'm really appreciative of that. And I've been reading it for the last few weeks and finally got it finished, so I thought I'd definitely do a review on it again as since I was sent the book for free. I'll just read on the back here. It says, praise for Peter Hart. We'll talk about Peter in a second. It's thought-provoking, erudite, yet eminently readable and entertaining. Peter Hart is a historian and author at the peak of his powers. Memory can play false, of course, but these recollections, admirably curated, have authenticity. Exquisite. Hart lets these men speak. So there you go. There's some praise for Peter. Peter, until relatively recently, was the oral historian at the Imperial War Museum. So this is a man who knows his onions. I think he was there since the 80s. So he's had a good long 30-year career, 40-year career in fact, interviewing and documenting veterans' recollections of various wars, including the First and the Second World War. He's written quite a lot of books as well, based off the memories and the recollections of those men as well, and women, of course. It's mostly men in most cases, and I've read most of Peter's books, not all of them. I've got pretty much all of them. His First World War ones in particular, and a couple of his Second World War ones. So I was quite interested to see how he tackles the Second World War, and he certainly has done a very good job of this. Just before we go on, this is based very much on the recollections and the memories of men. As a historian, it's always quite difficult to use memory because it can fade, it can, things get mixed up, stories change in the telling. I mean, even think about what you were doing a year ago, just on an average day, and it's very difficult to recollect exactly what happened. I know this because I've kept diaries when I've been away in places, and I've thought back to the times, and I thought something had happened. I checked the diary was written at the time, and it was completely different. So when people are going through traumatic experiences such as warfare and combat, that memory also fades or can be shifted about quite a lot. However, as I said, Peter is a historian and has dealt with this quite a lot in the past. So as he even says in the introduction to this, that things, events that were verifiable have been basically left in, other things have been taken out, stuff that they couldn't verify. So it is very much based on history, it's very much based on the experiences of those men. It concentrates on the 2nd Battalion of the 2nd Battalion of the 5th and 4th Territorials. No, I should know that. Yeomanry. Sorry, the 5th and 4th, the 2nd, 5th and 4th Yeomanry. Part of the 11th Armoured Division, so they were fighting in Normandy. They landed a little bit after the invasion itself. So they came in a few days afterwards, but they fought all the way through to Germany, through Holland, through to Germany. They took part in some quite big battles as well. So they were around Caen. They were also fighting in Operation Epsom and Goodwood as well. And then they even fought on the edge of the Battle of the Bulge as well. And then had that, as I say, the advance into Germany itself. The book doesn't just cover the combat experience of the men. A large part of the beginning of it is about their training in Scotland, in various places, and interestingly, some of the stories about before they even get hold of tanks. There's 3 or 4 men that are moving around together in formation as though they're pretending to be in a tank. Seems almost ridiculous, but obviously they've got nothing else they can be doing, so they're still trying to train to work together as a team. Funny little stories like that. it actually also concentrates on just a number of men as well throughout it. So the same names come up all the time, which is great, I think, because you really follow the people from the beginning of their war experience all the way through to the end, and I think that is a really nice way of doing it, rather than just plucking lots of different memories and different bits and pieces from other people's recollections and just sticking them in and creating a narrative like that. You're actually following these men. You feel like you know them almost by the end of it. People like Steele Brownlee, who's an absolute lunatic by the sounds of it, and was always at the forefront of all the fighting. Other men like that. It's an interesting aspect that you're almost living cheek to cheek and jowl by jowl with them as they are fighting their way through Northern Europe against the Germans in the last days of the war. The combat experience is very visceral. What's interesting is the Germans, as the war grinds on towards its inevitable end, the Germans start to use more and more Panzerfausts. You see more of those rather than tanks. So the threat changes definitely from a tank to an infantryman. It could be a hedgerow, it could be a garden wall, it could be a building or anything like that. Very different threat, and this again is really picked up in this book. You obviously also have survivor bias, because obviously the men that are in the book are the only ones around who get interviewed, so you don't get to hear obviously from anybody who is a casualty, but they talk about their casualties and they talk about their friends, and these guys, they feel, it feels as though they just kind of become immune almost to death unless it's a really close friend, and they're just talking about it matter of factly, especially towards the end. And these are just young men that really signed up early on to take part in the great adventure, and then they're seeing people getting killed left, right and centre. I mean, specifically in the battles of Epsom and Operation Epsom and Goodwood, where the British tank and infantry cooperation wasn't so good. They're going through that learning process of how to actually fight on the ground, having never had combat experience or little combat experience before that. They're taking huge casualties, tanks are brewing up left, right and centre, but they kind of get over it and they realise that they need to be fighting alongside the infantry, not as a separate army itself. And it's that learning process of the British Army that any army goes through, and in particular the British Army in the end of the Second World War, because of the way that the fighting took place in northern France and in Holland and in those areas and in Germany. What I found particularly interesting as well, apart from the bit where they are training, is also there's a section about halfway through. It's called "What Was It Like?" and it's just a chapter that just is completely removed from the history, or the flow of the history, should I say? And it's really just talking about how the men are actually surviving day by day and what they're doing, even down to meal times and things, how they're dealing with that, how they're living in tanks, because this is what they're doing. They're in an armoured box for most of the day until they're lagering up at night. Some of them get stuck out in the open as well during operations, and it's just how they survive. And that was a really interesting section for me in particular. Just that day to day, completely alien to anything I know. You come under constant stress and threat of German activity, but you're also surrounded by your mates as well, and just getting on with the job, basically doing your duty. Really interesting stuff. There's a few pictures in the centre, as there usually is with these, just of some of the men that are talks about in the book itself, and also some of the recollections and photos, in particular of the second 5 and 4 Flower themselves as well. These are from the archives. Obviously, a lot of these will be Imperial War Museum. I'm not going to go through all of these for you, but it gives you a good idea. It's just a smallish section. The one thing I would say was there is a lot of mention of areas and towns and villages and things. However, there's only a few maps at the front, so actually finding where the action went. That's not to say that the maps aren't good. They are very, very good maps. However, I would have felt that the maps being in the text somewhere closer to where where it was talking about, so you're not flicking backwards and forwards. And I know it's difficult to set these things up sometimes, and obviously it's another cost to add more and more maps. And to be honest, with Google, you could probably just find most of these places anyway on Google Earth, and then work out where things are happening. It's not particularly difficult, but I think it's something that a lot of books probably don't concentrate on so much, and that's the mapping. And I think this kind of is the same in that respect, really. But it's a very minor point. It didn't stop me enjoying the book any less at all, and I think this is a thoroughly good, interesting book, interesting aspect, and really well told. And I went through the praise for Peter Hart, and he does say here, Hart lets these men speak, and he really does. He's a really good writer. I've not read a bad Peter Hart book up to this point, so you could probably argue I'm a little bit of a fanboy, but this is a particularly good one, and on something that I had very little knowledge on as well, and I feel as though I've come out of it knowing a bit more about the 2nd, 4th and 4th Yeomanry, and also a little bit more about the 11th Armoured Division as well, and their manoeuvres through Northern Europe. It's given me a little bit more to chew on, and it's something that I'm probably going to be pursuing in my wargaming fun as well, probably with some more O group stuff, looking more into the operations of Goodwood and Epsom as well, and having a look at those in more detail and seeing if there's games and campaigns that I can play around those. So yeah, very much recommended. Go out and buy it. Go and get yourself a copy. I don't think you'll regret it.